Yo, what up? How's it going? And welcome back for another video. Today's video will be covering the Sandbox versus Kingzone series in the LCK Regional Qualifying Tournament semi-final round. Cool. So we can see the topics that are right over here. We're going to talk about series overview, as well as each game, and kind of a goodbye to Sandbox, and talk about Kingzone's future in the tournament, because they will play in the next round tomorrow at the time of me filming this video. Alright, so let's just do a little series overview. So before we talk about how the whole series went, let's just talk about a little bit of a preview about each team. So let's quickly talk about Sandbox. So Sandbox, to me, is a very strange team. At some points in the season, they look like maybe they're the best team. I was never convinced that they were the best team, but sometimes during the season they look pretty good. But there's nothing like a best of 5 series to really show you what a team has. A best of 5 series against, another good team to show you what a team has, and Sandbox showed a lot, or lack thereof, versus SKT. And this series was a lot of the same. Yeah, Sandbox is a weird team, man. They have some good players, like Summit's a great player. Didn't really show it too much in the playoffs. Dove is a great player. He had some good games against SKT. On Fleek during the season has looked pretty good, but during the playoffs has kind of looked like a non-factor, especially in the SKT series. Looked like the worst player in that series. Ghost and Joker are just kind of a bot lane. Ghost has his cool picks, Joker has some cool picks, but in terms of when you look at like the top bot lanes, you don't put them in consideration. Whereas the only player on that team I think you can put in consideration with the top players in their position maybe is Summit, and maybe Dove. I think Dove's a very good player. So Sandbox is a weird team because you don't really know what they want to play to. With some big advantage that they can have over another team. They don't really have one at the moment. It doesn't seem so to me against other good teams. And they don't really have like a clear advantage against the other good teams. And they just seem weird. They just seem weird to me. Good season for their first season, or good season for their first year, but it seemed like a weird team. Whereas Kingzone is very obvious where their strengths are. So Kingzone, they have the best bottom lane in LCK, and there's no contesting that for me. Maybe you can say like Teddy or Effort or whatever, maybe. But it's not even close in my mind. It's not even close at all. Like Deft and Tucson are so good. Deft is insane, and I would even put them in the ring for best bottom lane in the world. Do I think they are the best bottom lane in the world? Probably not. I think Ming and Uzi are very good. There's a couple other bottom lanes that are very good, but you can definitely put them in the conversation, and I don't think you can do that with any other bottom lane in Korea. Maybe Teddy, but Teddy's more just a team fight AD carry anyways. Great player, but so Kingzone has this obvious strength of their bottom lane. Their bottom lane is insane, and the rest of the team is no slouch. Rascals had a pretty good year towards the end. Cuz started playing really great towards the end. He has a really great series in this game. Their whole team's just kind of stepping up a little bit, and they just have a huge advantage in the bottom side, but their top side is starting to get a lot better as well. Cool. So let's talk about how the series actually went. So let's talk about how the series went. So this series really just felt like the better team won the series. And as I said before, there's nothing like a best of 5 to tell you which team is better. You watch best of 1s, you watch best of 3s. It's kind of really hard to tell. But when you want to watch a best of 5, most of the time the better team wins. And most of the time it's pretty clear. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes a team wins and you still might think that they're the worst team, but they were just better on the day. But this series really was all about, and the series that Sandbox had against SKT was really all about the better team winning the series. And that's what happened today. So this series really felt like, in game one, game one was just, we'll talk about each game a little bit more in depth, but game one was In Depth We Trust, and they had In Depth We Trust. They put the Karma on top side to just nullify Summit, so Summit didn't get any advantages. Sandbox had a terrible draft. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And just Deft was just popping off that whole game. It was not even close. They got a huge advantage, and they really picked like get advantage in the early. If we get advantage in the early game, we get Baron and we win. That was basically the win conditions of Kingzone's team composition. We'll talk more about that later. And then in game two, game two, Sandbox actually wins that game, right? Because they get the nullifying pick. So they actually get a nullifying bottom lane against Kingzone's bottom lane. And then they actually get some advantages around the other lanes in the early game and just kind of snowball that into a win and had a kind of a face roll comp. And, props to them. But after that, all Kingzone had to do for the rest of the series was just ban Karma. That's all they had to do for the rest of the series was just ban Karma, and now you can't nullify one of our lanes. And if you can't nullify Deft, and Deft gets to leave lane, then pretty easy series for us. Is really how that actually went. They just started banning Karma, and the games just got so much easier for Kingzone because Sandbox couldn't nullify their strongest opponent in the map. Obviously, game 3, we'll talk more about that more, but that was the Cuz show, actually. It actually had nothing to do with Deft. Deft got out of lane and got to do Deft things, but really that game was all about the actual other sides of the map. And when you show that against Sandbox is like, all right, we gotta shut down this bottom lane. We gotta shut down this bottom lane. We gotta keep this solid so we can get advantages everywhere else. And then Kingzone wins a game where they don't play around their bottom side at all, and they play around their top side and their jungler, and they destroy you with that. That has to be a huge confidence killer, and that just tells you, okay, we have no way of getting into this game. And then game 4 was just, kind of a stomp all around the map. So what was really cool is Kingzone showed a bunch of different styles in this series, and we're just obviously the better team against Sandbox. Whenever I watched the series, I really thought, after game 1, the way that Kingzone did their draft for the rest of the series, to me, was they were playing this series as if they knew they were going to win this 100%. I think after they won game 1, they're like, oh, okay, we're winning this series. Even if after they lost game 2, they're like, oh, okay, we're winning. And I think the rest of the series, they were just showing Damwon Gaming what they can do. They were showing them all these different looks that they could bring into the next series. So Damwon won't know what to ban. Because if you just run Ezreal Tom Kench every game and you just shit on them the whole entire series, then you'll never get to play it in the finals. So I thought in this series Kingzone maybe, because they were just not taking Ezreal at all, even when it was up, when it wasn't banned, and they would ban it themselves. I thought they were actually just not picking it and just banning it out so that they can actually be able to play it in one of their games in the finals. So really felt to me this series Kingzone was looking way past their opponent because they didn't need to even look at them. All right, let's talk about each game. So I'm gonna pull up my Games of Legends website. Not sponsored. I just really like this website. Cool. So let's look at game 1. I can actually cook on this, so it's a little bit bigger. All right, so let's look at game 1. Okay, so if you watch the broadcast, the English broadcast, then you would have heard LS and Valdos talking about this is one of the worst drafts they've seen in a long time for Sandbox, and I hard agree. So I don't actually have this screen pulled up where it shows what order they picked the draft in and everything like that. So we're not going to talk about that. We're just going to talk about what the drafts can actually do after it's already set. Okay, so let's look at Sandbox's draft, and let's look at what it can do without looking at Kingzone's draft, and then we'll compare it with Kingzone's draft, and I'll show you the difference. So just looking at this draft by itself, what this looks like is you have a strong bottom lane with an engaged support, so a really powerful bottom lane with engaged support. You have the Silas right here, power pick in the meta, great team fighter. So you'd have these 3 champions that are great at team fighting right here. And then you have the Kha'Zix and Jace. So you have the Kha'Zix and Jace. Oh, and this is also plenty of disengage because you can disengage with Rakan and Xayah. And you can play a side lane with Silas if you want to. So plenty of disengage, so you can stick these guys mid in the mid game. And then you have the Kha'Zix, which was strange being picked, and the Jace. And so something you can do with this, when you pick Kha'Zix, a lot of times you pick Kha'Zix to pick people out in the side lanes or shadow a split pusher is really good with Kha'Zix. So, the thought is Jace gets really far ahead, and Jace can just pound in the side lane. Kha'Zix can roam in between mid and the Jace, and you can pick people off in the side when they go to collect waves. That's usually how you play Kha'Zix. If you get ahead, then you can do that with your Kha'Zix. Your Jace can slam, all that stuff. So that's the idea behind this composition. But then when you look over at what Kingzone has drafted, and I'm pretty sure they late pick Kha'Zix. When you look over what Kingzone's draft is, it is so hard for this to ever happen. It's so hard for this to ever happen. Okay. So let's just look over at Kingzone's bottom lane real quick. So we have Ezreal, Tahm Kench. So what this lane does versus Zyra Khan, so whenever you see a Zyra Khan, you're like, oh, Zyra Khan, that must be, Zyra Khan's going to win every single lane they have. But when you actually verse it against Ezreal, Tahm Kench, it actually puts the onus on the Ezreal and Tahm Kench players to make a mistake in order to allow the Zyra Tahm Kench to play the game. So it requires them to make a mistake for Zyra Khan to even be relevant. So what I mean by that is, as long as Ezreal and Tahm Kench don't stand on top of each other, there's never a good target for Rakan to all in and for Xayah to all in. And Ezreal just gets to pound you and play crazy aggressive. Ezreal can make mistakes in this lane as long as Tahm Kench positions correctly. So Ezreal can play super far up, super aggressive. If the Rakan, ult flashes onto him, then Tahm Kench just eats the Ezreal. The only way this ever works is if you ult flash, and then instantly W the Tahm Kench and you burst the Ezreal. But it's unlikely that's going to happen. Tahm Kench just eats you and then you E away, or you flash E away. It's actually so hard for the Rakan Xayah to ever do anything in this lane. And Ezreal, Tahm Kench, you just play super far forward and just pelt them with Qs and ults and all that good stuff, and can play crazy aggressive. And essentially, when you have an Olaf on your team, is Olaf can split the map on that side if you want to. So Olaf can actually just play bottom side if he wants to. He has a lot of options. He has the Karma. He can play around. Karma has the ability to control waves if she wants to. So this is actually a good game for Olaf. He can just invade the enemy jungle and can just play around the side of the map that they want to play aggressive. And with this draft, you want to play aggressive with the Ezreal Tahm Kench side of the map, especially when you have a player named Deft on your team. So this allows them to be able to play aggressive like that. The LeBlanc Sylas matchup, they actually late picked LeBlanc, but in terms of the lane matchup, a lot of times this is a beneficial matchup for Sylas, because if you W forward on the LeBlanc, you're able to respond in time with Ian out of the damage, or you can simply just throw down the chains in front of you onto the spot where LeBlanc came from, and if she instantly teleports back, it'll explode on her, and then you can actually dash in and trade aggressively and win out on trades most of the time as a Sylas lane. You do get kind of outscaled in the mid game. LeBlanc mid game is crazy, and you can just do LeBlanc things, playing in between. Play side lanes. You could play disengage with your Ezreal. You can pick people out near your Ezreal because you should have priority. And the Karma is just nullifying Jace. So they actually picked the Kha'Zix after the Karma was shown, I believe, which was the weird thing, because you have a Karma into a Jace matchup, so Jace is never going to slam in this lane. They're also on red side, so Karma's just going to play back. Olaf's going to split the map. And it's going to be so hard. It's so hard to dive a Karma. It's so hard to get big advantages of Karma. She's going to buy Ninja Tabbies, and she's just going to hit you with Qs, kill the wave from a distance if she needs to, and just trade evenly in the lane. And you're never going to be able to get off the ground like you want the Jace to get off the ground. So that's why this comp is so bad. There's almost no win condition. It's just like win lane, win game. Whereas over here with Kingzone's draft, is they just get the Ezreal ahead, they take the bottom tower, they get the dragon because they have Olaf and Ezreal Tahm Kench, so they just have full control over bottom side. They transition their bottom lane top side, they take the Rift Herald. If you fight them that early in the game, you're going to lose. They take the Ezreal Tahm Kench mid, they just keep hitting the things. They just answer waves on the side lanes with the LeBlanc and Karma. You just keep pounding that till you have the mid tower. Hope that you get a Mountain Drake. If you get a Mountain Drake, then you can peel back, take Baron. You have so much area of control. They have no chance of getting in, and you win the game. It's actually just such an easy draft for Kingzone to play out as long as they play it correctly. As long as their bottom lane gets ahead and their Olaf just punishes like he should, then it's so hard for Sandbox to ever even get into the game. So that's basically how that game goes. This game stalls out for a long time, but if you were watching it, they were just waiting. They were just keeping pressure on until they could take Baron. This is what this team does. You know, when you watch it and you're like, LCK, lol, they do nothing, but okay. But at the same time, you have to look at what the composition actually does. This composition is, I'm going to take your towers. I'm going to take your outer towers. I'm going to take all the neutral objectives. And then once I'm able to take Baron, I'm going to take Baron, and I'm going to end the game. And it's up to you to try to find something. Try to find a mistake we make. This is not the comp where you just face roll into them. You don't do that really with this composition. Mainly, it's just, all right, we're just going to keep pressure on you. We're going to, keep our advantage. We're not going to give you anything. We're going to take Baron. We're going to end the game. That's what happens with that. All right, I talked a lot about game one because I thought game one was the most contentious one of them all. Let's talk about game two. Okay, game two. So game two was the interesting game, or not the interesting game, but the game two was the game that Sandbox actually won. So Kingzone, this was interesting because they had a high priority on the Xayah. They actually picked Xayah. I don't know what their second pick was. Maybe Silas, probably. I think it was Silas Xayah at 1-2. And then they picked Pyke as the counter pick at 3. So it's a counter pick to Tahm Kench. Pyke destroys Tahm Kench in every category. If you hook the support, or if you hook the carry, then Tahm Kench has to eat him, and then Tahm Kench basically roots himself. You dash forward, stun Tahm Kench. If you hook Tahm Kench, then you have Tahm Kench. You stun him, and the damage threshold, the thick skin does not block the damage threshold for Pyke. So Pyke shits on Tahm Kench. That's why Pyke was picked in this series. Pyke actually didn't end up getting to do anything in this game. The big pick that we're really only going to talk about is the Karma. So the big pick was the Karma. So the Karma just got to nullify the bottom lane, the enemy bottom lane. So completely nullified the enemy bottom lane, and and they had the aggressive jungler in this matchup. They actually had some decent lanes. So Renekton's a losing lane matchup, but Renekton's the best weak side top laner. Ryze actually has a decent matchup in the Silas. Silas doesn't want to steal your ultimate, doesn't do anything for him. Silas can steal your ultimate in the late game and do some cool stuff with it, but doesn't really do anything in lane. And it's actually a pretty easy matchup for the Ryze, honestly. Silas doesn't have any good ults to choose except for the Renekton ultimate. They have a huge mobility comp, and they got ahead, and they just stayed ahead. So this comp just got ahead, and they stayed ahead, and they won. So props to them. They had the aggressive jungler, the aggressive top side, and the nullifying bottom lane. The other thing that was interesting in this game is the Predator take from Tucson on Pyke. And I just want to explain that really quick. The reason why I took Predator rather than the Aftershock is because what is Aftershock going to do for you in this lane? You are never going to kill these people unless your jungler comes. So you're never going to be able to kill these people. If you do, they make a big mistake. It's literally Karma Tahm Kench. It's going to be so hard for you to kill. So they just took the Predator because it's like, all right, we're not going to be able to do anything bot lane because they're just the please don't kill me daddy def lane is what they have. So there's no way they're going to be able to get that. So Sandbox gets ahead. They have the aggressive jungle matchup, and they win the game, so props to them. All right, game 3. We ban Karma now. We ban Karma. Good luck winning the game. And this was where the Nidalee came out, so this is pretty cool. Alrighty, so they actually completely dropped, Ezreal was actually banned in this game. In game 2, they dropped Ezreal priority anyways. I think, honestly, just to show that they can win without it. So, both teams draft a pretty aggressive bottom lane. I can't remember how the bottom lane actually ends up playing out, so I just know it doesn't. I just know Kingzone is ahead in every facet of the early game. I think the bottom lane was pretty just neutral, and I don't even think there was any jungle attention paid towards the bottom side. This was all about Cuz playing around Rascal and Neon. It was really all this was about. So let's talk about this stuff real quick. So I was waiting for Nidalee to come out. I thought Nidalee would come out this year and just didn't. I thought with the nerfs to with the initial nerfs to Vision 2 years ago or whatever that I would help Nidalee out a little bit. And then after that, Scuttle Crab not being a huge part of the meta, I thought would be a big buff for Nidalee, and I thought she'd come out a little bit earlier, but I'm happy that she's here now. So Nidalee has a really good matchup in the Olaf. So Olaf doesn't do well with burst champions. So if you can burst down Olaf, so you can keep a distance from him, take his health down, and then burst him down, then you don't really get to do Olaf things. So Nidalee has a good matchup in the Olaf in the first place, and can actually outfarm him, which is probably the only jungler in the game who can outfarm him, maybe Udyr. Cool. Irelia has a positive matchup in the Jace for the most part. If you're a good Irelia player, easy dive setup with Nidalee Irelia. Great 2v2 setup with Renekton and Silas. Renekton has a positive matchup in that matchup as well. And this is really kind of a neutral matchup. Whoever gets their CCs off can win. But this game wasn't really about bottom lane. This game was all about the top side. Man, Cuz just popped off. He got a dive play top lane and denied an entire half a level worth of experience to Summit. Instantly goes mid lane, kills the Silas, and gets out alive while the Olaf doesn't get anything and takes up Summit's time. And then Nidalee was just unleashed, went around the map counter jungling, taking the early Drakes. They ended up getting 2 clouds. And this game just really snowballed out of control. They have so much siege with this comp with the Nidalee Xayah, so much objective control with the Nidalee Xayah Thresh, and can take these chaotic fights, and they can also just take neutral fights as well. So this team just got ahead, and it was just crazy from there. Alrighty, game four. So this is, they actually flexed a Jace on this one. So a lot of flex picks in this composition, and they finally got the Zyricon in the bottom lane of Kingzone's hands. This game just kind of snowballed out of control after like a mid-game team fight, and Kingzone won the game. By this time, it was big mental boom for Sandbox, and a big just Kingzone's a better team, and this is over. Honestly, is how I felt about this. Neon actually pulling out the Mana Moon build, which I thought was really cool. I've been waiting for that to come back out. Especially in mid lane, you're just spamming abilities, looking for that on-hit damage and all that good stuff. So honestly, this was just Kingzone being better than their opponent in this game. Don't want to make this video too long, so that's why I'm not talking too much about this game, because I didn't find this game too much interesting. Just the better team won, and it was over from there. I thought the first 3 games were really telling because they told really how the series was going. In game 4, you already knew what the series was going towards. It would take like a big mess up from Kingzone, or just a revival from Sandbox, in order to actually win out on the series. All right, we're quickly going to say goodbye to Sandbox and talk about the future for Kingzone and the rest of this tournament. So goodbye, Sandbox. Your year was fun. Sandbox is a cool team. They're an interesting team. I kind of shit on them just a little bit, but they're a team of mostly rookies, who, when they came in at the beginning of the year, all the talk was still about Griffin, who came last year. All the talk was still about Griffin and Damwon, and all the good stuff, the other young teams. And Sandbox was kind of like the little brother that was left behind. And nobody really talked about them, kind of expected them to be bottom of the table. They did decent in spring, and then ended up in summer. At one point was in first place for a while. They're in first place for a couple weeks in the middle of the season, and we're starting to look like maybe a legitimate team. And then kind of fell back to what expectations, still above expectations, but kind of more realistic expectation. They're definitely not the best team in the league, but they do have some good shining parts. So I think Summit had a great season. I think Dove had a great season. I think OnFleek had a pretty good season other than the playoffs. The playoffs were really bad. I think Ghost and Joker showed some stuff. I do think if they want to actually win anything, they will have to make some roster changes. But I'd be happy with the same roster coming back. So that's Sandbox for this year. Sandbox, not a very exciting team for me, but they have a good story. Cool. Let's talk about Kingzone's future. So at the beginning of the tournament and during the playoffs, I said it's either going to be Kingzone or Afrikas who do the miracle run through the tournament. I thought Kingzone and Afrikas were the best team in the tournament. I think Damwon is the next best team, and Sandbox was a lost cause the entire time. There's 3 teams playing for this tournament, which is a lot of the regional qualifiers Honestly, it's either one team is most likely going to win it all, or maybe a couple teams. It's never all four, hardly ever. I really think just Sandbox looks so bad against SKT. Afrika's looked pretty good against SKT. It looked like a real team. And I always thought Kingzone was on the rise anyways. I always believe in deft, and deft we trust. We always say. So that deft. The Kingzone for Afrika series was actually going to decide it for me. I think one of those two teams are going to win the tournament. Obviously, Kingzone won that series 3-1, I believe. And they won this series 3-1. I think the finals is going to be a 5-game series. I would imagine. Adama there looking decent. They did get destroyed by SKT. So that's going to be interesting for that. I think Kingzone can definitely pull it off. I'd love for Kingzone to be the third team. Damwon I'd be okay with. But I'm rooting for Kingzone. I think they're the third best team. But obviously if they lose a Damwon, then Damwon definitely deserve the spot. So it's gonna be cool. The finals are gonna be cool. Kingzone versus Damwon. So we'll look forward to that. And I'll do a series recap and a VOD review for that. I may be doing a couple VOD reviews for this series, probably game 1. I think game 1 was, telling, and I might do game 2 and game 3. I'm not gonna do game 4. I might do game 4, but probably won't. Anyways, hey, that's gonna be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed making it, and hopefully I'll have a lot more content coming out soon for you guys if anybody's super into that stuff. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you guys enjoy watching LCK and all the good stuff. I'm gonna stop talking before this video is gonna go for 30 minutes. So I'll see you later, and bye. Bye.